How are you doing? This is David W. Williams, also known as Diamond Dave, the founder of the highest paid part-time job in the World Options Trading Academy. Let's get right into it. What we're going to talk about is how do we make money from it. We haven't done one of these videos in a long time because been really busy. And we're going to talk about the Pelosi trade. And one thing we know about the Pelosi family is there's been a lot of news around them, especially over the past 2 years, once it was revealed how involved they are in the markets. This particular video is not going to be based around that, but it's going to be based around what I call situational trades. And all trades are situational. However, there's a certain way in which you can sometimes look at something that's going to be event-based and determine that there may or may not be a trade based around that. And that's one of the ways in which I've been able to get money out of this market is really understanding event-based scenarios. And everybody looks at this differently. Everybody has different events that they pursue. And you got to do it the way you do it. But what I'm going to try to do in this particular video is help you kind of get a larger perspective of how to use events that are going on around you as an opportunity to be profitable. And the reason why you are going to invest the time in watching this video is because instead of you arguing with people on the internet about events, instead of you trying to figure out how you can be right behind your perspective of an event to somebody else, you can learn how to use these events that are going on around you to figure out how to generate some profit. And it's not about you making $1 million tomorrow based around understanding this. It's about changing how you see the world. How do you see the opportunity in a situation based on what is going on around you, as opposed to you letting somebody present you information that you're supposed to get upset about, or you're supposed to be for or against it. And at the end of the day, it only supports their situation, but it never benefits your situation. So let's get into it. So recently, okay, hold up. I don't want to get ahead of myself. Let's break down what we're going to talk about in this particular video. So what we're going to talk about is how to find trade opportunities. We're going to go into like some basic research that I normally would do. And then also we're going to talk about why not to use software as a crutch. And then we're going to go ahead and wrap everything up. Now, here's the story, right? Nancy Pelosi is going to visit, there is a story that Nancy Pelosi may go visit Taiwan within the next few weeks. And there's a lot of controversy around that because I think China wants to bring Taiwan into its fold. Taiwan is not necessarily recognized by the United States as an independent state. And therefore, China may not appreciate Nancy Pelosi. She's also supposed to bring some other people over there, going to Taiwan, because it can damage their reputation in the world as being able to pretty much probably control that region from a military standpoint, but also from an economic standpoint. And they necessarily are not in favor of her doing that. And they've spoken about how it will be detrimental to U.S.-Chinese relationships if Nancy Pelosi does take this particular action. However, let's go into this really quick video, and it's going to kind of give you a better perspective of this particular story. Let's get into it.
Tonight, tensions building between Taiwan and China, with the United States in the middle. U.S. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi is planning to visit the island next month. She would be the highest-ranking U.S. elected official to visit since 1997.
I think that it's important for us to show support for Taiwan.
And NBC News reporting today she's invited other senior lawmakers. But the Biden administration seems concerned.
I think that the military thinks it's not a good idea right now. But I don't know what the status of it is.
President Biden and his Chinese counterpart Xi Jinping are expected to talk on Thursday, with Reuters reporting Taiwan will be a key agenda item, according to a source familiar with the planning. Taiwan is self-governed, but China claims it as part of its territory, and Beijing has never ruled out taking the island by force. Taiwan rejects China's sovereignty claim and vows to defend itself. The U.S. doesn't officially recognize Taiwan as a separate country due to its long-standing one China policy, but it has pledged support to the country in case of an attack or coercion. The geopolitical friction getting extra attention in the wake of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. The concern that Russia's invasion and the world's response to it may embolden China. Taiwan's representative to the United States said this in February as Russian troops were mobilizing before their attack on Ukraine.
Like everyone else in the world, we are watching the situation with much concern and anxiety. The Chinese have been threatening Taiwan through a number of means.
Since Russia's war in Ukraine began, the White House has struggled with its messaging. President Biden made headlines with this exchange with a reporter in May.
Are you willing to get involved militarily to defend Taiwan if it comes to that?
Yes.
White House officials later clarifying that the U.S. was sticking to its historic policy.
Nothing's changed about our one China policy.
But the U.S. military says Beijing has already been rattling its saber. General Mark Milley said over the weekend that China has become significantly more and noticeably more aggressive over the past 5 years. Now, Taiwan is also stepping up their visible military presence, staging air raid drills early this week ahead of Pelosi's trip. There's a rare bipartisan support for Pelosi's visit to push back on Chinese aggression.
We're not going to let the Chinese Communist Party dictate where the Speaker of the House should go.
I think China should not have any say over where American officials travel.
But China's foreign ministry firing back at Pelosi's plans with a firm warning.
We are fully prepared. If the U.S. insists on going its own way, China will certainly take firm and forceful measures to safeguard its national sovereignty and territorial integrity.
The question for Washington, what are those firm and forceful measures? Or is Beijing just bluffing? Matt Bradley, NBC News.
Okay, so that's kind of like a basic breakdown of the story. Now, in my opinion, right, there is going to be a lot of anxiety in the market, and there will be a lot of uncertainty in the market once this comes out that it's confirmed that she's actually going to make this trip, and then probably most definitely once she arrives there. Now, how do you find these trade opportunities? Because we're going to go into that. I just do a lot of reading. Even though I showed you the video, I just do a lot of reading. And I spend a lot of time reading and understanding what's going on in the world around me, and then I've trained my brain to see the opportunity there. And this is just a process. I wasn't always like this, but I've spent a lot of time training my brain to see the opportunity and to not get caught up in what somebody else is telling me, but asking myself, where is the trade in this situation? Does one even exist? Then creating a narrative around it, and then determining, okay, what do I need to do to try to figure out what a trade is? However, the first thing is I do a lot of reading to try to figure out where these opportunities are. I don't depend on somebody else to present these situations to me. I don't believe in that. Because then if that person is no longer here, then I don't know what to do, which is why I don't do that. So I try to empower myself with understanding how to access this information, which is relatively easy to get, and then understanding what are the connections in the market to this particular information. And then I just sit back and observe. Now, in my opinion, if Nancy Pelosi does go to Taiwan, if the information comes out that she's going to make that trip, it's going to create a lot of uncertainty in the market. And it's going to create a lot of anxiety, especially around Chinese tickers. The ticker that I'm currently going to really be looking at, though, because I think it'll impact all of the Chinese traded tickers, but the one I'm really going to be looking at is TSM. Okay, I'm going to be looking at Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company. I think their ticker is TSM. And I'm really going to study that ticker. I'm going to look at it from a fundamental standpoint. I'm going to look at it from a technical standpoint. And I'm going to get a lot better understanding of its historic highs. One thing I noticed if I looked right at the chart, it hit 140 and it rejected really hard. Almost a year later, it hit 140 again and it rejected really hard. So one thing I know just by looking at it is that nobody believes this thing is worth more than 140. Looking at its lows, right, on the daily, on the yearly, but on the daily candles, I can easily plot out its lows around $75. And I know that over the past year, year and a half, or really 2 years now, maybe even longer, it's hit a support of around 75. But one of the reasons for that was because of the pandemic. And we've seen it now hit that support of 75 again and move up, but not as aggressively as it did after the pandemic. However, what I'm going to do is spend a lot of time looking at TSM, understanding this company. I noticed that when Russia invaded Ukraine, if you look at the chart around mid-February, you got a gap down. right? So that anxiety and that uncertainty in the market right about here, you got a big gap down the next day. These are the things that I'm going to be looking at to try to determine, is there opportunity on this ticker based around this particular trip? So I may spend, the next week just really researching this really hard, understanding it, what's some of the news around this particular company, things of that nature, to get a better understanding of this company. So what I do is I'll do like a blitz and try to figure out how can I get as much information around TSM as I can. And I won't just look at it from a fundamental, but also we'll look at some of the technical chart that we talked about before. We seem to reject that 140 pretty hard, but that's not an issue for me because in my opinion, the play is going to be on the downside, not on the upside. But I will look for any short-term resistance that I think may exist, that I see it moving towards, because then I know it may bounce down from there. Also look for its support. The next thing we want to talk about is why not to use software as a crutch. Now, what a lot of people are promoting in the market, and I'm not against it, they have a right to do it, is that you should just use software to tell you where the trade is at. The reason why I disagree with that is because, one, what happens if the software doesn't exist? Then how do you trade? I'm anti you depending on any software or person that doesn't empower you to be able to make the decision on your own. There's nothing wrong with talking to other people. There's nothing wrong with masterminding. There's nothing wrong with talking to other traders and getting information from them. But I'm against you waiting for somebody else to tell you what to do, right? Because you don't want to make the decision for yourself. I'm not for that. And what's interesting is on social media, we use these terms around people being disempowered, but then we look to be disempowered ourselves. It is always interesting in human behavior. So we use these terms as negatives around people being disempowered, and then we look for opportunities to be disempowered because we don't want to make the decision on our own. And so I utilize software in my trades, but I never make a trade based on what the software tells me, right? I don't make a trade solely on what software says. I don't do that. So I know how to look at a situation from a comprehensive standpoint, and the data from the software is combined into that, but I just don't use scanners and things of that nature to try to figure out, okay, well, the scanner says this, so that means I should play it. And so that's going to be how we're going to make money from it. Really short video. It's not going to take a long time. And TSM is not going to be the only trade if this thing goes the way I think it's going to go. I think a lot of the Chinese tickers are going to be impacted. That's just my own opinion. None of them may be impacted. In fact, she may go over there and all the Chinese tickers may turn green and start running. You never know. However, one of the ways in which I've been successful in this market, and I'm going to continue to be successful, is I understand how to build out a narrative. I understand how to build out a thesis based around what I'm looking at. Then I understand how to really study the tickers that I want to look at. And then I understand how to continue to observe them over time till I get the actual indicators that I'm looking for to not know when to move, right? And I don't depend on somebody else to give me the indicator. So you could choose it and be wrong. Okay, so now you know not to do that. This idea that there's a perfect entry and a perfect exit is incorrect because nothing's perfect. So I may enter into a situation earlier than somebody else and we still can profit from the situation. I may enter into a situation after somebody else and we still could profit from the situation. What I've always used as my personal example is that when I was a novice trader, I always looked to enter in at the money or in the money with an expiration date as far as possible. For some people, that's difficult, and I don't think they understand what I mean. And I just think it's because they haven't looked at enough options chains, right? But I always, when I was a novice trader, I always looked to enter in at the money or in the money at an expiration date as far as possible. I didn't look for the MACD to at the money or in the money at an expiration date as far as possible. And because I kept it really simple like that, it was easy for me to make decisions, right? So that's pretty much going to be this particular trade. That's going to be this. How do we make money from it? If you got any questions, hit me up in the comments. David W. Williams, also known as Diamond Dave. I'll talk to you later.